Hey, what's happening, A-Push kids? We're back for our next lecture on AP US History. Today's topic is 5.3, the Compromise of 1850. Our learning objective today is 5C, explain the similarities and differences in how regional attitudes affected federal policy in the period after the Mexican-American War. We have a few key ideas. We're going to start off with the first two right off the bat. First of all, the Mexican cession led to heated controversies over whether to allow slavery in newly acquired territories. And key idea number two, the courts and national leaders made a variety of attempts to resolve the issues of slavery in the territories, including the Compromise of 1850. So let's just review a little bit from last time. So we talked about last time the Mexican-American War. Now, very successful military operation by the United States, lasted 2 years, ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe-Hidalgo in 1848, where the United States gains that Mexican cession territory, that area in blue that's on the bottom left-hand side of the map. However, the problem is that the end of the war brought many questions with it for the United States. The most important of these questions was what would happen with the issue of slavery in these new territories. Now, up to this point, the issue of slavery in territories had been dictated by the Missouri Compromise, or the Compromise of 1820, which was brokered by Henry Clay of Kentucky, and that had created that 3630 line, but that had only applied to the Louisiana Purchase. Now we just got all of this new territory, and a lot of it is below the 3630 line. Now, Northern congressmen really don't want to see the expansion of slavery. Now, not a lot of them want to necessarily see slavery completely ended. They just don't want to see it grow any further. And probably one of the most important of those is a guy named Dave Wilmot. Now, Dave Wilmot tries to pass what is called the Wilmot Proviso. Now, what this law would have said was that it would have banned all slavery from the Mexican cession territory. Now, the Wilmot Proviso is important because what it does is it creates a split within the political parties at this time. And the voting on this doesn't happen along party lines, which is typically how votes happen within Congress. You typically see all the Democrats today vote together and all the Republicans vote together. At this time, you would typically see all the Whigs all vote together on the same thing and all the Democrats vote the same thing. But what the Wilmot Proviso does is it divides these two national parties. And instead of voting along party lines, they vote along regional lines. And so we see all the Southerners voting against the Wilmot Proviso, and many, though not all Northerners, will vote for it. And so we really start to see in 1850 right here with the Wilmot Proviso, the really dangerous lines of sectionalism really start to emerge. And this then introduces us to a new political party which really starts to emerge in 1848 called the Free Soil Party. Now, the Free Soil Party was all about keeping soil in the West, land in the West, free from slavery and to stop the expansion of slavery. Now, please understand this, okay? That Free Soilers are not abolitionists. They do not think Congress had the power to end slavery. They were against the expansion of slavery into the West, not so much against the existence of slavery in the South. That's a kind of key difference. Many of them didn't like slavery, and they hoped that by kind of keeping slavery in the South bottled up where it was, that it would kind of die a natural death, that eventually free labor would replace slave labor as a system that was more economically efficient, but they just didn't want to see it expand. They thought that slavery could only continue to exist if it expanded. So if you stopped its expansion, you could eventually stop its existence. Now, our next issue with the expansion of slavery has to do with the state of California. So let's go back to just a little bit of historical context here. All right. 1830s, Mexico had offered cheap land to American ranchers and farmers to move to California. Now, they had also done this in Texas, and this had led to Texas independence, et cetera, et cetera. Now, California soon becomes inundated with Americans who are moving out there. And when the Mexican-American War breaks out in 1846, many Californians will also revolt against Mexican rule, and they'll also create their own independent nation of the California Republic. This California Republic was annexed by the U.S. as part of the Mexican Cession in 1848. But the total population of California is still fairly small. This will change the next year. There's a rancher just outside of San Francisco, just outside the city of San Francisco. His name is David Sutter. And Sutter decides to expand the water drainage area around his mill that he needed to be able to grind the grain to be able to feed cattle of his in the region. When workers are expanding that drainage system, they discover gold. And that discovery of gold near San Francisco is going to lead to a flood of Americans moving to California, as well as other people moving to California in 1849. These people are called 49ers, hence that San Francisco football team name. And they're hoping to strike it rich. And they come from all over the world. They're coming from not only the eastern part of the United States, but they're also coming from Latin America. They're coming from Europe. Many are coming from Asia as well. They're settling in the area just outside of San Francisco. So many of them are coming into San Francisco. And this is going to lead to an absolute population boom in the West, as tens of thousands of people flood to try and strike it rich in this particular area. And gold fever was national at this time. We see people from all across the country coming there, coming to pan for gold. And it was also global as well. People coming from around the world by various different means, as you can see from the cartoon there. People trying to have flying machines, jumping off of, trying to find ships, things like that, coming to California. Now, where they come from, the chart here shows about 80% of them are from the United States, but we also have European, Asian, and Latin American miners that are also coming as well. Here's one of the pictures from the time period. You can see that kind of the international flavor. On the right-hand side, you see Asian miners. On the left-hand side, you see American miners. We can see this also in the cartoon as well. Many Asians, especially Chinese and Japanese, are coming to come mine in the United States. It also changes San Francisco. Here was a drawing of San Francisco before the gold rush. And then here's kind of what it looks like after the gold rush. See all the ships in the harbor. It's a much expanded city itself. Now, this growth in the California population will lead directly to California needing to become a state. They soon reached the population threshold that was needed to apply for statehood as a result of the California Gold Rush. That law, of course, that set that population threshold was that Northwest Ordinance and the Land Ordinance that we talked about as the one success of the Articles of Confederation. So by the end of the 1840s, the U.S. had achieved its manifest destiny. All right, we had this continental empire from the Atlantic to the Pacific. However, this westward expansion will stimulate the economy, spread democracy, increase U.S. nationalism, but issues over slavery will arise. Now, this issue of slavery in 1850 will affect California, because in 1850, California applies to become a free state. Many of the people that had moved there from the north or places where slavery did not exist. And so the issue, though, is that 3630 line bisects California. It cuts it in two. So they're going to need to come up with another compromise to solve this issue. And so the compromise that they come up with is called the Compromise of 1850. And this, once again, helps to settle this sectional dispute between the North and the South. And is once again come up with by the guy who comes up with all compromises, Henry Clay. The Compromise of 1850, which settles the dispute over California's admittance, does the following things. Number one, California is going to enter as a free state. Number two, the people of the Utah and New Mexico territories could vote themselves on whether to allow or to ban slavery. This is a concept that's called popular sovereignty. Keep this in mind. It's going to come up again later on in a future video. Number three, the slave trade is going to end in Washington, D.C. So we're going to get rid of the slave trade in Washington, D.C. Many Northerners really didn't like the fact that it was happening there. Going to put a stain on the nation, especially when dignitaries would come and visit. They would see the slave trade happening. There was a slave auction pretty much right outside the Capitol building. They would auction off slaves on the Capitol steps. Not exactly a good sight. Not exactly a good view for the United States. And fourth, and probably most controversially, there was going to be the creation of a stronger fugitive slave law that would allow Southerners to recapture slaves in the North. Now, remember, one of the things we talked about, one of the ways that slaves resisted their enslavement, one of the overt ways they resisted was by running away. And since slaves were very expensive, especially with the increased need for slavery, whenever they ran away, this was very financially devastating for Southerners, especially if they didn't own many slaves. They wanted to be able to get them back. Now, this fugitive slave law was really, really controversial because what it did was that it required, and sometimes even allowed for, was that not only could they be recaptured and re-enslaved, but sometimes even free blacks would also be captured and enslaved. If you've ever seen the movie 12 Years a Slave, we can see some of the effects of that. Now, many Northerners, they formed vigilante committees to protect runaways. We saw the increase in the Underground Railroad in the North, but this further drives a wedge between North and South over the issue of slavery. So to recap today, what we've had so far is we've talked about how California has grown in size, especially thanks to the California Gold Rush at that particular time. We've seen how the issue of slavery has continued to divide the North and South through issues such as the Wilmot Proviso, which, although fails, helps to start to divide the different political parties. And we end with the Compromise of 1850, which admits California as a free state, ends the slave trade in Washington, D.C., allows popular sovereignty in the West, and creates the Fugitive Slave Law, which Northerners absolutely hated. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and until next time, go Pack.